I am the main board director and CEO of Green Automotive Company. And just before I start my presentation, to pick up on one point that Paul made in his presentation, refuse trucks are going to be electrified. I live in France. You're going to get a very European flavour from this presentation. There is a small village in France which is using pure electric refuse trucks with a 237 kilowatt battery pack in them. They've been doing so for 2 years and they work perfectly. So believe me, this type of thing is about to change. What are Green Automotive? Very few of you will have heard about Green Automotive, I'm sure. A state-of-the-art niche vehicle design, engineering, manufacturing and sales company. We go from one end to the other. We design drivetrains, we deploy drivetrains, we work for OEMs, we have our own vehicles, and we spread right across the whole pure electric spectrum. We don't do hybrids. Let's start with some history. End of the 19th century, this little beastie was launched for the post office in Scotland. Again, for the sake of the American Scotland, that's a small country just above England. That, of course, replaced this, the horse and cart. But at that time, the only way to get petrol was in a can like that. And that, in fact, existed for nearly 15 years. So please, let's not talk about range anxiety. You had to drive down the road to get a can of petrol in the past. It's not so much different with electricity today. That infrastructure became this, which led to this, and then became this, and eventually will lead to this. So we've got the humour out of the way. Let's deal with where business-to-business applications are going, and that's our focus at Green Automotive. You all know B2B as business-to-business. We'd like to focus that on back to base. Back to base is the target market for electric vehicles. It should have been from the very beginning because they work. Range anxiety does not exist if the range required is similar every day and the starting and finishing points are the same. And there are literally hundreds of potential users in this category. All deliveries, pizza to post to packages. They all go back to the same place every night. All the handymen in the world, carpenters, plumbers, painters, electricians, TV men, alarm installers, gardeners, they're all going back to the same place every night. And if they're using a great big pickup truck now, you're absolutely certain they're not using the same pickup truck at the weekend to drive and see Auntie Mabel. They take their SUV for that. Realtors, I have no idea what a realtor is, so perhaps a translation from one of you Americans about that would be useful. Meter readers. But of course, the biggest single category is people movers. Shuttle buses, airport vehicles, school buses in particular, park vehicles, anywhere where you're moving people. And then, of course, refuse collection, which I touched on at the beginning of the presentation. Certain police vehicles, fire vehicles, ambulances. How many disabled ambulances go exactly the same route almost every day, the same distance? It's completely predictable. And certain categories of military vehicles. So you have a huge target audience for electric vehicles on what we're calling a back-to-base principle. The question to ask yourself is, why has Europe been faster to adopt in this particular category? And of course, the main reason is the cost of fuel. We pay double what you pay in the US for fuel, and that's a key driver for people to move towards electric vehicles. Big incentives and big penalties. Incentives to change and penalties if you don't. Rebates on the purchase price in excess of $10,000. Rebates on import duty. The Scandinavian market has an import duty of 100% of the price on every single vehicle that goes into the market, unless they're electric, in which case it's zero. So electric vehicles can be substantially more expensive in other markets in Europe and actually be very cheap in Scandinavia. Write down against tax, 100% in the first year. If you're buying a vehicle for business use in the UK, you don't get any tax relief on it unless it's electric. And of course, as Paul touched on earlier on, the congestion charge in London. That's $15 a day to drive into London every single day, unless the vehicle's electric. If it's electric, it's zero, and that's going to go up. So you've got a very, very big incentive to be driving electric vehicles in London. In addition, you pay road tax at various different levels depending on the size of the vehicle for every vehicle that you use in Europe. You don't pay road tax if it's electric. And daily parking charges. In many, many parts of Europe, and in particular in London, authorities have overlooked daily parking charges. That's $60 a day in London to park a car. So if you're driving into London as a dentist, a doctor, whatever it might be, and you're working in Westminster in London, you're saving $75 a day by driving in an electric vehicle compared with using a petrol or a diesel vehicle. Stunning figures. Enormous amounts of money are involved. An electric vehicle for somebody working in Westminster in London is free of charge. Costs $75 a day, will pay for a hell of a lot of car. And of course, I think there is a huge amount more pressure on emissions and pollution reduction in Europe than there is in America. London itself stands to be fined 350 million euros a year because of poor air quality. And that will make a very big incentive for people to switch towards using electric vehicles. So, of course, many have tried. UPS, FedEx, Veolia, Tesco's, Amy Hilden, these are our customers in Europe. These are people we've supplied and look after electric vehicles that they use. And for many of them, this was the vehicle that they tried. It's called the Modak Truck. It was launched 7 years ago. It's a pure electric delivery vehicle. Nothing unusual about that. Launched in the States by Navistar as the E-Star. Didn't work out for them, but has proven to be an extremely popular vehicle in Europe. And what did they discover when they used an electric vehicle? What were their key takeaways? Not unsurprisingly, the cost per mile for fuel was substantially lower than it would have been for using diesel or petrol. 2.5 cents, I've converted all of this obviously into dollars, 2.5 cents versus 14.5 cents per mile traveled. That's an enormous reduction, especially if you're in the delivery business. Overnight charge equals the tank is always full. So if you're in the delivery business and at some point during the course of the day you've got to drive somewhere to fill up with gas, that's a wasted journey, because if it's electric, the tank is always full in the morning. In inner cities, we discovered that the range that we provided was too much. That was a big shock for us. We're providing a battery that can produce a range of 100 miles, and our customers are saying to us, can't you bring the cost down and just give us a battery that does 20 or 30 miles? We don't need to go that far. The drivers felt more relaxed. No noise, no vibration. In one FedEx depot in the centre of London, a fight broke out one day over who was going to drive the electric vehicle because their enjoyment was so much greater. Incredible. They're perfect for stop-start because there's no gears. Drivers love that. Less maintenance, reduced parts cost, and the maintenance that you do have to do is easier to do. And of course, most of the companies that bought these vehicles the first time round did it because it was great PR. They wanted to say, we've got electric vehicles we're using for deliveries. Tesco's, one of the big supermarket chains in the UK, who have just recently withdrawn from America, Tesco's bought 10 of the vehicles simply so they could say they were doing electric vehicle deliveries. They had no real intention of using them at all. So we're now getting past the point where they're PR and image-driven vehicles to the point where these vehicles actually genuinely pay their way for the customers. And the B2B sector is growing. One of the biggest problems with the B2B sector is there weren't any vehicles. The customers didn't have a choice. Nothing was available. And now what we see is a whole range of vehicles coming to market. And the little beauty in the middle, the bus, that's one of ours. The others are from various different manufacturers around Europe. Top left-hand corner is the Mia, manufactured in France, sold across Europe, available in a van and a car format, uniquely with a single seat in the middle for the driver, so they don't have to make a left-hand drive version or a right-hand drive version. And by the way, in case it's not clear, you do drive on the wrong side of the road in America. What are the key drivers today? Right-sizing the energy storage. It isn't always about giving people 100, 150 miles. Actually, some customers want less mileage than that, and that reduces the price. It isn't all about lithium. There are several new technologies coming down the road that can change that, but it isn't necessary to immediately dismiss lead and lead derivatives, because they do have a place, they do have a role to play. What it is about is total cost of ownership. It isn't about the headline price of an electric vehicle, which will always, in the short term, be much higher than the equivalent gas or diesel version. It's about the total cost of ownership. After sales is critical and has been forgotten by so many people. We've built a super business in Europe taking care of other people's electric vehicles because they don't know how to do it themselves. They don't provide a decent level of support, and the customer is petrified of what happens when their battery requires replacement. We refurbish batteries, so they don't require replacement. We give them a second lease of life at something like 10% of the cost of a new battery. That's game-changing in the business-to-business sector. Finance packages are key to success, and they're very difficult to find. We've struggled in Europe to get finance companies to fund the cost of people leasing electric vehicles. Incentives and penalties will be important until the volume reduces the overall cost for the customer. We love the congestion charge in London. It drives sales for us. We'd like to see that in many other cities around the world. Pollution reduction is key for us in Europe, less so here in America, but it's a key driver. If they're the drivers for today, what will be the drivers for tomorrow? Ultra lightweight composite structures to reduce the overall weight of the vehicle and the structure and make things more creative, and I'll show you some in a minute. Greater energy density in, let's say, energy storage, whatever format that takes. Hub motors, because they change the nature of the way we build delivery vehicles. Radical use of space. If you're using hub motors and you've got no traditional motor, whether that's electric or internal combustion engine, you've now got a new shape dynamic in the way you put the vehicle together. Zero or low emission range extenders. They're around the corner. We have 2 developments underway ourselves, which would be pretty game-changing if they were to be deployed in the market. Ultra-fast charging and moving from cable to wireless charging. Wireless charging is around the corner. We've all been reading about it, and it's going to make a significant change in this market. What will we see next? You'll see something like this from us. This is an electric shuttle bus, luxury shuttle bus, designed entirely by us and deploying tried and tested technology. That will hit the markets from us in November. Where will delivery vans go next? That isn't some sketch that won't ever happen. This is a project that we're doing together with Volkswagen and Fiat and Michelin in the UK to produce the next generation of delivery vehicle. It has hub motors. That's a radical change from where we are today. And what hub motors allow you to do is change the shape of the interior of the vehicle, because you now don't have that huge block of motor that you've got to put somewhere in the chassis. So you've got hub motors, you've got a different structure for the driver, you've got more carrying capacity, and that vehicle will be finished by the middle of next year. It's a prototype, but it will be a fully working prototype with technology that is game-changing. Thank you very much for your time. Apologies for the use of the proper English instead of the American English. And if you have any questions. More. Would you like me to take questions now, Paul, or after?
Well, we have time for about 1 or 2 questions. Is there anybody from the audience that has a question? I noticed that that shuttle bus was interesting. That's probably not going to be an application where you can only charge at night, though. There will probably have to be some charging during the day on that application?
It's about right-sizing the energy storage for the routes that the customer's going to do. So we make a modular battery pack. If the customer wants 200 miles, they can have 200 miles. If they want 400 miles, they've got to charge during the daytime. And then you're into fast charging when they have a lunch break, for example. So you can make it work. But it's really aimed at the 5-star hotel to the airport route, the airport to the car hire. It's that type of use.
Okay. One question?
I'm Ignacio CEO from Bayer Material Science. I wonder, I mean, we're a materials company, so I'm curious about the materials and the composites that are being used for these new vehicles, vans, and so on.
You're interested in the composites that are being used?
Yeah. What are you using composites for these new vehicles in their structure? Maybe other types of glazing materials?
Carbon fiber, essentially.
Okay.
And you know, there's a whole bunch of new methods now available for making carbon fiber structures at the right price, which 3 or 4 years ago just didn't exist.
And I imagine they make a big difference in the range, in the performance of these vehicles, right? The weight.
They make it go a lot further with a lot smaller battery pack in it.
All right.
And that's what it's all about. Pleasure.
We have a question in the back of the room.
Yes, John Licorice with the Doran Company. I was just going to ask you about where do you think your price point will come in with your delivery vans? Today, a delivery van is probably, what, 17,000 euros a piece. Where do you feel you'll come in?
Every vehicle that we produce, we have an objective for it not to be more than 120% of the vehicle that it's the equivalent of in the marketplace. That's our objective. And we get pretty close to that.
Okay.
120% means that if you factor in just the savings that you make on fuel, this on total cost of ownership will work out less expensive to run.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.